After a long international break, it is time to finally get back to some proper FPL. The deadline is tomorrow. In today's video, we're going to go through that complete guide. We're going to have a look at updated chip drafts if you're playing your wildcard, you're playing your free hit. We're going to talk about my team and all the comments that you left on the team selection video. We're going to address some of those. We're also going to talk about some of the key questions. What should you do with the likes of Enzo Fernandez? Should you still bring him in? Should you bench boost if you own him? What is the general benching decisions? Who are the best players to buy? All of that going into Game Week 8. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim, and subscribe if you are new to the channel. We are now finally having some FPL back. We're going to dive in. I think the big question that I'm seeing asked a lot is around Enzo Fernandez. Now, he came home from Argentina during the international break early. It was reported that he had a slight bit of knee pain and he has worn strapping so far this season. But it was also reported that it was a planned rest and he wasn't going to feature for the Argentina in the second match anyway, so he was allowed to return home. Enzo Maresca, in his press conference on Friday, said that he hasn't trained yet. He didn't train on Thursday, but him alongside Caicedo and Pedro Neto are all expected to train on Friday afternoon. And if they do, they will be available for selection going into the weekend. I do think if I was on Wildcard, I would still look at buying Enzo Fernandez. However, if you're just using a free transfer, I might be inclined to wait a week, and that is probably what I'm going to do with my team. However, if you're on Wildcard, I would still go with him, and if you already own him, I would still start him because my prediction is that he will start for Chelsea, but I'm not sure it's confident enough that he'll definitely do it and get enough minutes to maybe use a transfer on him, but I do think he will probably start. And with Cole Palmer likely out for another 6 weeks until at least the next international break, he looks like a fantastic option. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about the overperformance of a few players and why I like some of them and maybe not some of the others. That's really Semenyo, João Pedro, and Kudos. They are the top 3 overperforming players so far this season. Semenyo is first, João Pedro is second, and Kudos is third. Now, one of the reasons I don't love Kudos quite as much is I think the fixtures for them are getting slightly worse, but also he doesn't have as many routes to points as maybe the others does. João Pedro might take penalties, although it might be Enzo Fernandez, of course, while Palmer is unavailable. When Palmer's back, it will be Palmer. Semenyo will also likely take penalties when Kluivert is not in the team. João Pedro's fixtures are getting better. Semenyo's are not that good, but he does have free kicks and he does have penalties, whereas Kudos is purely open goal threat. I do think Kudos, though, I've spoken to a few Spurs fans and they say he is so important to that Spurs team. When Spurs are playing well at the moment, Kudos is likely to be involved with how vocal he is. So if you own Kudos, I don't think I'd be selling him with some of the upcoming fixtures, but I'm not sure I'd be buying you with someone like an Enzo Fernandez or an Ismail Assar. Probably look better options to buy. Now, João Pedro I like because of the upcoming fixtures, despite the fact that he's had 0 shots in the past 4 games. And Semenyo, just with the amount of contributions he has to a Bournemouth team, of course, they aren't in Europe either, which is a little bit of a boost to someone like a Semenyo. You don't have to worry about European fixtures. All of them have overperformed. All of them are good picks, but with a few extra things like fixtures for João Pedro, if you have a look there. Also, Semenyo being on penalties potentially and on some free kicks, I like him the most. The final one is triple captain on Erling Haaland. Now, if you've still got the triple captain, there are lots of opportunities for both Haaland, maybe Mo Salah, maybe a Bukayo Saka you could have a look at. I'm not sure I'd be playing it on Erling Haaland this week. I do generally think that the week after the international break can be a little bit more difficult to predict what's going to happen. And Everton are naturally a team that we think can be quite difficult to break down. Now, actually, so far this season, their defensive data is only 15th overall. It's 10th over the last 6 game weeks, which isn't the best. So you could look to play it. But particularly without Jack Grealish there, I do think Everton will try and adopt a more of a defensive approach. So I'm not sure I'd be doing it. It's not a bad week. It's not a definite no. I think it's fine. It's a decent home fixture for Haaland, who has had a rest, not featuring in the second game of the international break. But I don't think I would do it this week. That being said, though, he is the #1 captaincy ranked player this week. 84% of you are considering or planning on putting the captaincy armband on Haaland, 10% going with Salah, 5% going on Saka, and basically no one else is really under consideration. I've got João Pedro in at number 4 and Jared Bowen in at number 5. João Pedro is an interesting one because I do think he will start. We did hear in the press conference, there was a little bit of confusion in the press conference where Enzo Maresca said that Pedro is a doubt, and people took that to be João Pedro, but the press conference reporters have clarified that that was Pedro Neto rather than João Pedro. But I do think the top three of Haaland, Salah, and Bukayo Saka do pick themselves. You could also have a look at Gyökeres, but I'm not sure Fulham away is that great a fixture regardless. And if we think Saka's on set pieces, he might be on penalties, probably, given he took the one in the last game. Although I think there's a chance Gyökeres still takes it. Saka is probably better pick than Gyökeres for captaincy. But I do think Salah and Haaland at home both are the two that I would look at. Liverpool are actually predicted to score the most goals this week. He has the best record against Man United. Everton for Haaland, I like. His form is great. He's predicted to be the most likely to score a goal this week. I like him the most purely based off form and what we've seen from Haaland. But if you don't have Haaland and you have Salah, I don't think he's a bad pick this week. And for example, lots of people have said, if I still own Salah, would I sell him to Bukayo Saka for a free transfer this week? No, I wouldn't do that unless you're reinvesting the money elsewhere. Unless that sort of 4 million you're spending this week, I think Salah is better than Saka this week. So unless you're doing a couple of transfers like Salah to Saka and a defender to Gabriel or Timber as an example, then maybe I'd consider it. But this week alone, I still prefer Salah to Saka. Now to talk a little bit about some press conference news. So the first thing is at Chelsea, and that was really the big press conference that we were looking at. Enzo Fernandez apparently didn't train on Thursday, nor did Caicedo, and apparently they were both expected to train on Friday afternoon. Now we might well get some more training photos, but interestingly, he said Caicedo didn't train, but he was pictured on their Instagram training or going out to training and sort of still photos of him looking great in what looks like a training session on Thursday evening. I think both Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez will be available and should start for Chelsea, but that is just a prediction. Maresca did say they didn't train on Thursday. Next up is Ben White at Arsenal. Now, there was lots of talk about Timber during the international break, and I'm not going to say he's a bad pick. It did get a little bit escalated when Ben White was not pictured in training. However, Arteta did say that was just load management and that Ben White is available for this game against Fulham. I do think that Timber will start, but they do play Atletico Madrid at home in the Champions League midweek. There is a small chance that Ben White could get this game. I wouldn't let it put you off buying Timber, as I do think he will start. Next up is a cheaper option in Alderete at Sunderland. Now, from the press conference, which unfortunately was on Thursday, he said he's only just returned, so we don't know fully, which is slightly annoying. If it had been a Friday press conference, we might have more information. The way he spoke, though, didn't make it out like the early sub from Paraguay is still there. He made it out like they're still concerned a little bit based off fatigue rather than anything else. I think he will probably start, but I'm not sure I'm confident enough if you're on bench boost to play the bench boost with him on it. Next up is Anthony at Burnley. Still a good pick with Leeds at home this week. He wasn't mentioned at all in the press conference, but he was only taken off as a precaution before the international break. So we are expecting him to be available. Ollie Watkins, I'm recording before the Aston Villa press conference. I am expecting him to be okay. If he's ruled out, it would boost someone like a Spurs defender if you're looking at that as part of a benching decision. And finally, looking at Bournemouth, Senesi, there was a little bit of a quote from the press conference saying he returned late from international duty, of course, playing early hours of Wednesday morning, I believe. So they are a little bit concerned about the fatigue, and we have seen him play not 90 minutes before, but I don't think that will rule him out. It's a big fixture against Crystal Palace, and I expect him to play. The only other one to talk about maybe is the Liverpool press conference as well as the Newcastle one. Now, Newcastle, Voltamada, of course, available. Lewis Hall, Livramento and Johan Vissa are all expected back by game week 12 after the next international break. That means that Dan Burn will probably play the next few weeks at left back, which means he's not quite as good for defensive contributions. It does mean that Voltamade will play the next few games up front, but from game week 12 onwards, there might be a little bit of rotation, and there is talk that Vissa might not go to the African Cup of Nations because he's yet to feature for Newcastle, and that is discussions that are ongoing. I still like Burn as a pick, and I still like Walter Marder as a pick, but just a bit of context. At Liverpool, he has said that Alexander Isak is back, available, and should be getting to the levels that we want him to go to. I still think there is too much rotation between him and the likes of Ekitike, both looking pretty good. Well, Ekitike actually looks better. I'm not sure I'd be buying both. Konate is available for them defensively, having been withdrawn from the France squad. Having a look at some of the best players to buy this week, I do like Pope long term. It depends a little bit on your wildcard window about which players are better, and you do need to adapt this slightly. If you're going to wildcard in game week 10 or game week 13, maybe you're looking a little bit shorter. Maybe Arsenal and Chelsea players become even more of a priority. Whereas if you've already wildcarded, maybe you're looking a little bit more long term. I do like Pope though, and I do have Sanchez second. The reason they're above Raya, I think Raya is probably a better pick than them, but I don't think Raya is in the best Arsenal players to be buying at the moment. We discussed this with a sort of in-depth graphic during the transfer targets video where I said David Raya has probably dropped out of my top 5 Arsenal players to own. I still like him. Don't need to rush to sell him. But if I was buying new, he's probably not up there. In terms of other ones, Petrovic at a cheaper price, Donnarumma. Donnarumma looked great this week, but a couple of the next fixtures are not as good. Rolfs at Sunderland looks like great for sort of bonus and save points. And of course, Dubravka. If you have Darlow, it sounds like Darlow of Leeds will continue to start in the short term, although we don't know quite how long term with their original number 1 being back from injury now. Into defense, I do have Gabriel number 1 and Timber number 2. We spoke a little bit about Ben White, but I just love Timber. I think he's got 2 goals, 4 assists so far this season, which for a defender is crazy good. And when you watch him, the attacking positionings he's taken up, I think he's worth the rotation risk. I'd still go Gabriel first, but I like the double up of the 2 of them. Then it's Senesi. A couple of the upcoming fixtures are not quite as good. I actually think Forest at home next week's not a bad fixture though. Then it is Dan Burn. If you've got the money for Gvardiol, he's getting quite a lot of assists with that over-the-top ball that we saw in game week 7, and he also did it in the Champions League. Then it is Mark Gay and it is Richards. It's the Crystal Palace duo. I do like Lacroix. I do like Munoz. I also like someone like a Van Dijk, and Anderson of Fulham in a couple of weeks will definitely be in the top 7. But right now, those are my top defenders to buy. Into midfield, despite the overperformance, Semenya remains number 1 because there are some really nice fixtures and they're not in Europe. He's playing 90. He's talismanic. He might be on penalties. He's on some set pieces. He just ticks a lot of boxes. I prefer him over Saka. I just think he's slightly better value, but Saka is definitely my top 3 Arsenal players to buy. Then it is Enzo Fernandez. I have said I'm not 100% certain he's going to start, but I do prefer him over all of the other midfielders that we've got in here as a buy. If you can, I would roll the transfer this week and buy Enzo Fernandez in game week 9. I would prefer that to buying pretty much anyone else there. Ismail Assar is next. The issue with him is it's Bournemouth and Arsenal in the next 2. Now, I like him from game week 10, but those 2 fixtures are difficult. But he's right up there for online data. And when he plays, he's great. But with all these fixtures, there is a slight doubt of his injury record as someone who's been burnt by that before. Outside of that, Eze and Declan Rice are both good options as another Arsenal alternative. Eze better as a short-term. Declan Rice may be better as a long-term pick. I still like Iliman and Dye. City this week, which isn't ideal, but from game week 9 onwards, the fixtures still look pretty good. And then Mohamed Kudus, I still like, but I would probably buy someone like an Ndai, particularly Sarr and Enzo Fernandez over him. In terms of those forwards, Haaland is 1. I still like João Pedro, despite the fact that he's lacked shots over the past few games. And then it is Gyökeres. He is the 3rd best forward to buy. But again, a bit like Raya, he's probably not in the best Arsenal players to own. It's probably Gabriel, Timber and Saka. I'm not sure I'd be using a transfer this week to sell Gyökeres to Saka, unless you've got maybe 3 and you've got nothing else you want to do with your team. I still like Gyökeres. He's still getting chances, but I do prefer other Arsenal players over him. Voltamada is next, probably just over Jared Bowen, particularly with the delay on Vissa returning. Then it is Mateta, again a bit like Sarr. From game week 10 onwards, Mateta and Sarr and the Palace players overall look great buys. And if you need a cheaper one, Thiago at Brentford doesn't look bad, but I like Calvert-Lewin based off the short-term fixtures if you don't have to play him every week. Benching ranking for game week 8. This generally takes into account a few things. The goalkeepers are more reliant on things like the clean sheet percentage that you can see here, but it also includes likelihood of getting save points, likelihood of getting bonus points. You also have, when you look at the attackers, the team scores lots of goals, but there's also individual projections, clean sheets, but also the likes to get DEFCON. So it's not based purely off the numbers. There's other things that are being impacted. Just before we have a look at that benching ranking, I'm being asked a lot, would I still bench boost with Enzo Fernandez or Alderete in my team? If you've got Enzo Fernandez, I think I would still play the bench boost. If you've got Alderete, I would probably use a transfer to swap him to someone else, like a Rodon or like a Mukiele, also of Sunderland. I think there's enough doubt about Alderete that I wouldn't, but Enzo Fernandez, I probably would be comfortable enough in doing it. Looking at that benching ranking, starting off in goal, Donnarumma at home to Everton, I love. Ryan next. Then it is Rose. We've got Darlow up there if you've got him away at Burnley. Sanchez I like. Pope, Henderson, Vicario, Dubravka, Areola, Mama-Vili, Verbruggen, Petrovic, Kelleher, and Sells. In terms of the attackers, if you've got a Kudos, start him. Enzo. Then it's Isak and Ekatike. The reason they've got ... is if you've got them, I think you have to start them. Only one of them's likely to start, but it's quite difficult to predict. It will probably be Isak. I don't advise owning either of them in your team because there is risk of rotation every single week between who it's going to be. But if you've got them, I would be starting them. Of course, Gyökeres, Saka, if you've got all of those, I would definitely be starting them. We've got Reinders high up there. Gordon just over Waldemar just because of set pieces and the potential for penalties. I really like Xhaka this week. If you've got him as your cheap midfielder, I would play him at home to Wolves. Calvert-Lewin against Burnley, just over Bruno Fernandez. Away at Liverpool's not great, but Liverpool have been a bit weak defensively and on penalties, we hope still, and good for DEFCON. Then it's Caicedo. I don't expect him to score 30-yard screamers, and I actually don't think the opposition will give him the chance to shoot from distance like he has done so far this season. Then it's Gakpo. Then it's Richarlison. I do think Richarlison is fine this week, but I'd probably be looking to sell soon. Minte, then it's Ndiaye based off the fixture. I'm not a big fan of Xavi Simons the way he's been playing and a bit of a risk to his minutes. Then you start to add in some defenders. Sunderland, Crystal Palace. I don't love the Chris Wood pick this week, plus a late travel back from international duty, plus he also got subbed off with a bit of a knock. If you own Chris Wood, I would probably be looking to sell him anyway. The Leeds defenders, I'd probably play over Stack just because of the DEFCON ability for them. Virgil van Dijk, then it's Diouf, then it is Senesi. Senesi's a little bit lower down. I don't have an issue actually benching him this week away at Crystal Palace. He plays for Bournemouth. Then it is the Spurs defenders. If you've got a Porro, a Van de Ven, and a Romero, if Watkins is ruled out, then they maybe jump up a little bit. Then it's Dan Burn. I don't love Dewsbury Hall as a pick this week. Burnley defenders, Anderson and Tarkowski at the bottom. Now, we did wildcard and free hit drafts early on during the international break, but a few things have changed, so I am just going to update it a little bit. Wildcard hasn't massively changed. I've gone with Pope, Gabriel, Timber, Senesi with Rodon and Anderson. If you want a Crystal Palace defender, Anderson could easily make way for someone like a Mark Gay, a Lacroix, a Munoz, or a Richards, depending on what your team value looks like. Elsewhere, I've gone with Saka, Semenyo, Reinders, Sarr as the midfielders, and I've gone with Enzo Fernandez. I would still own him on wildcard. If you wanted to go with him, but bench him for Ismaila Sarr this week, I have absolutely no problem with that. You could also go for a Kudos, a Gordon, a Minte, a Paqueta, a Xhaka, a Caicedo, a Rice, an Eze, an Illiman and Dye, a Grealish. Of course, if you go Rice or Eze, you have to drop another Arsenal player. All of those are good options, but I do think with Palmer out for a while and Enzo being in the number 10, even with him being a flag, I would go with him on wildcard, but you might just want to play Sarr over him. Up front, it's João Pedro, Haaland, and Waldemar. You could look at someone like a Bowen over one of those if you wanted to. You could look at a cheaper option like a Thiago or a Calvert-Lewin to spend a little bit more money upgrading someone like a Reinders if you wanted to. But I think the general structure is I wouldn't go Salah. I'd go Haaland. I'd go with the triple Arsenal that we've got of Gabriel, Timber, Saka, and I'd go with lots of good midfielders. Build something that looks a little bit like this if you're on wildcard, and it also can be bench boost in game week 11. I think 10 also works okay, but game week 11 doesn't look too bad for this team either. Now, one thing we haven't had a look at, and apologies to everyone asking in the comments about a free hit draft. It's not something I really thought would be played this week, and not many of you have asked about it, but some of you did in the comments, so I have looked at it. I did look at it for my team, because actually my team doesn't look that great this week, and I think this team definitely looks better than my team, but I just think I will plan on saving it. But if you were looking to play it, goalkeepers a little bit, take your pick on it. I've actually gone with the Sunderland goalkeeper, Rose, because he's quite good for bonus. Wolves don't look that great. I've then gone with Gabriel, Timber, and Gvardiol as the defenders. Xhaka is in my midfield because I've gone with Salah and Haaland. If you wanted to go with a Saka over Salah, but if you're on free hit, I would try and do something a little bit different. So I've gone with Xhaka, who I really like at home to Wolves. Lucas Paqueta for a similar reason. Reinders, Salah, and then I've gone Ismaila Sarr. I did originally have Enzo Fernandez in there, but I'm not sure I'd take the risk on free hit this week. João Pedro up front, Haaland captain. The bench is fine. It's quite, good for the fixtures. Calvert-Lewin, Rodon, Mukiele, and Dubravka, but I don't expect to use them. Haaland, of course, captain. If you wanted to go even more different, you could captain Salah, but I would captain Haaland with this team. And then let's talk a little bit about my team. And first of all, I appreciate all of the feedback on the video, the team selection video yesterday. The first thing I'd like to say is I'm so open to hearing people disagree with my opinions and what I'm doing with my team, because the whole point of this game is that not everyone has the same opinions. Not everyone thinks the same thing about everyone's team. And that is absolutely fine. So I actually had a lot of interesting discussion. Spent a lot of time replying to a lot of comments of people who thought rolling was the right thing. I was being too patient with players like Bruno. Why am I keeping him? What am I doing with Gyökeres? Lots of things, selling Tarkowski when I said I wasn't going to make a defensive transfer. So I just want to cover a few things of that firstly. So the first thing was, why am I keeping faith in Bruno? I completely understand it. I do think there is a world where he scores maybe one more penalty and he's right up there. And I think he's still a good pick. Some of the fixtures from next week look pretty good, but it's also a squad structure thing. I do think there is a world where we might want Salah about game week 12. And if I was to downgrade him, it just makes it even harder to get back to him. So I like it from the squad structure point of view. And I don't feel like I need to sell him. I want to upgrade Stack, but I think there are better ways for me to get that money to do it. I do not have blind faith in Bruno. I feel like he's not been the best. I do think there might be some returns in the upcoming fixtures. I don't love it this week particularly. And I think the fixture against Liverpool makes it look and feel even worse than maybe if he had a slightly more easy fixture, which he does in Brighton and Forest in the 2 games after that. The next one is Gyökeres. So, for example, Bruno to Saka, Gyökeres to another forward. I'm just not sure it's worth 2 transfers this week. Also, the week after an international break, I do think it's a little bit unpredictable. A lot of the players we're looking to buy are all away from home, which adds to the unpredictability of it. I also do think there's a chance that Gyökeres does take the next penalty. I get that I'm basing that purely off blind hope and a gut feeling, and as a Gyökeres owner, and I may well be proved wrong. And if Saka takes the next one, I may well move from Gyökeres to Saka. But I still think they will share it around a little bit. Now, as a result, if I'm not going to buy Saka, I don't think I need to sell Gyökeres right now, even though he has blanked in the 2 weeks I've owned him. A few people mentioned the Bruno Stack combination. I can do Bruno to Enzo Fernandez and Stack to Sarr, but I can get to Enzo another way. And then Bruno has Liverpool and Brighton in the next 2, whereas Ismaila Sarr has Bournemouth and Arsenal. And I think Bruno's a better pick for the next 2 than maybe Sarr is. I might review it again in game week 10. That leads me on to my potential transfer this week. And I looked a lot at that sort of 3 combination of transfers, but I don't think that selling David Raya is a good idea now, unless I'm going to buy another Arsenal player. Because when you look at some of this data about predicted clean sheets over about the next 10 weeks, they are so far above them. Now, I wish I had Timber, absolutely. And I've even considered doing Raya and Tarkowski to Pope and Timber as 2 transfers, but I do want to upgrade Stack. And with Palmer out, I really, really like the Enzo Fernandez pick. Hopefully it's not too much of a Chelsea bias, because he's going to play the number 10. He might be on penalties. He's on some set pieces. He just looks like a great pick, plays an awful lot of minutes. But with the slight doubt, I don't know if I can commit to doing it this week. But the 2 transfers are Stack up to Enzo Fernandez and Tarkowski down to Rodon. Now, I appreciate both last year I said I didn't love Enzo as a pick, but that was a long time ago. But also I said I wouldn't sell a defender unless I really had to. But I've got past the weeks that I actually need Tarkowski. They were the West Ham and Palace fixtures. The only other week that I definitely need Tarkowski is game week 9, where Tarkowski has Spurs at home. Rodon has West Ham at home on the Friday night game as part of that game week. So I could easily play Rodon instead of Tarkowski. This gives me the money to do Stack up to Enzo and keep Bruno Fernandez. Whether you think that's right or not, I think this feels like a much safer route. However, do I think I need to do it this game week? Not really. Rodon, I might start over Senesi. He might be slightly better than Senesi this week. It's really close between those 2. So I don't feel like that's a massive upgrade. And then it's Enzo Fernandez. Do I need to buy him this week? Bench Illiman and die when Enzo is a little bit of a doubt? I'm not sure I need to. I think the most likely scenario is that I'll do this going into game week 9 next week. Sell Tarkowski before the Spurs fixture, buy Rodon for the West Ham at home fixture, buy Enzo for Sunderland at home in game week 9, and sell Stack despite the fact that he plays West Ham at home. Give myself a little bit of information in case something crazy happens and I need to rethink what I'm doing with my transfers. So just going back to my team, the plan is, despite having 3 free transfers, despite the fact that my team doesn't look great, despite the fact I own Bruno and Gyökeres, who have not been great for me, I am going to roll the transfer this week. That is my plan. Unless if we got news before the deadline that Enzo Fernandez was starting for Chelsea, then maybe I'd consider doing it. But I think there's enough doubt about Enzo Fernandez's minutes. I'm probably 70% that I think he'll start, maybe even higher. But I think that's enough doubt to not force the transfer, especially given it's away from home in a 12:30 kickoff, despite the fact that Forest have conceded an awful lot of chances. I hope that offers a bit of an explanation of my thinking and my team. I thought I might get to rolling up to 5 transfers, but with Palmer being out for so long, I feel like I need to find a way to get Enzo Fernandez in, and I probably will do that next week unless there's news before the deadline on the deadline stream if he's available to play or not. That is a nice long video for you all, hopefully covering everything after a long international break. I cannot tell you how happy I am to have a little bit of FPL and some Premier League back, to check my team every couple of minutes to see how, I was going to say every couple of hours. No, every couple of minutes to see how we're getting on. But also it means the return of the deadline streams. It is scheduled up above. It is scheduled on my channel. Go and click the notify button. We'll be live for the 2 hours before the Gameweek 8 deadline. We are back. We'll be looking for any early Chelsea team news, you know, with the likes of Caicedo, with the likes of Enzo flagged, you know, João Pedro in there. If anyone's still got the likes of Chris Wood, we'll be looking out that. We don't often get Chelsea news though, so I'm not holding out too much hope, but that's what we're really looking out for. The plan is to roll unless we did get Enzo news, which might force me to buy him because it is a decent fixture. Anyway, any questions you have that are not answered in this video, hopefully everything is, but if it's not, drop it all in the comment section down below. I'll answer as many as I can. If not, bring them to the deadline stream on Saturday morning. Also, hopefully that has cleared it up. Hopefully you understand what I'm doing with my team. Thank you all for the support on the channel. Thank you all for the engagement in the comments. I honestly love it. And I actually, just going through all the comments yesterday, people disagreeing is part of this game. And seeing what people thought made me think, okay, maybe I shouldn't sell David Raya and maybe there's another route to do it, which probably looks like the Tarkowski downgrade, who doesn't really get into my team that much anyway. Well, let's wrap it up there. Thank you all for watching. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new, and I'll be back again very soon.